Hello and welcome to the Magic Mirror Podcast. I'm your host, Khan, the Trinket Mage. And with me, as usual, is my co-host, 33 Elk.
Hello.
And our other co-host, Salubrious Snail.
Hey there.
And today we have a special guest, the one and only Maldhound.
Hello, everyone.
Today we're going to be just talking to Maldhound about his channel and what he does, and asking any general questions we might have. And then we're going to talk about content creator playgroups and whether or not you can apply that knowledge to your own playgroup.
You guys told me this was going to be about my Niv Mizzet fanfic.
Oh, the fanfic episode is next week.
Elk promised me that I could talk about my Into the Glizzyverse fanfic, and I will fabricate the text necessary to prove that.
We'll see if it comes up in the user-generated questions.
I'll bring it around naturally. Don't worry.
Yeah. If you can link it to a question, go ahead. Which then we'll end the episode with some questions from users.
Quick, I'll leave one asking for the fanfic.
Thank you.
Just type one real quick. But before we get into all that, we need to thank the podcast sponsor, which is Card Castle. They let you scan and sort your collection digitally. If you use our link in the description, you get 1 free month of premium. Thanks to Card Castle for sponsoring the podcast. So I want to open here with just, can you describe what type of content you make?
Oh, God. It's... there's always like a little needle inside my brain that is flicking back and forth really rapidly on whether I describe it in an artistic way or whether I describe it in a really cynical way. Because the really cynical way is I just make react content. I spent a long time thinking it was like, more complicated than that. But most of the stuff I make, the series most people know me for, if they know me, is the series where I roast people's commanders. And it always ends with whether or not they can get it. So there's actually some people who think all I do is make a Smasher Pass series, which is also very... They're like, I love your Smasher Passes. And I'm like, the 100 seconds before that, nothing. It's just... but even the roast series, like a lot of it is really scripted. I'll spend a small to large amount of time coming up with like bits and angles for all of it, but at the end of the day it's really just like contrived react content, and a lot of the things I've branched out to from there mirror that in a lot of ways. I do some other stuff that is skits, but even those skits are typically derived from like, oh, what is an exaggerated way you might have reacted to the first time this happened in your playgroup? A video I posted a few days ago was the first time you play against blue and you get Cyclonic Rifted when you don't know what that spell is. And even that is react content. I'm just doing a dramatization of how the first time everybody felt when they were like, there's no way that spell exists. And so sometimes I like to have a more artistic view of myself and go like, I'm a comedian. I reach into the zeitgeist and I pull out how people feel about the world. But like, yeah, I make reaction content and I do my best to give it a lot of structure and, make it a little bit more complicated than, zoom into my face and go, wow, that's crazy. Anyway, here's the top 10 shock jocks in GTA 5. But that is the family of stuff that I do.
I think it is somewhat self-deprecating to call yourself just reaction content. I think, you definitely put in a lot more effort than most of the like sort of reaction clip farming type channels out there. And I really do appreciate that about your shorts. I think they're quite funny.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I do need to improve my vocabulary when it comes to talking about it because it does come off as self-deprecating. And the important thing is I'm very conceited. Wait, I don't know y'all well enough to go deep on that bit. It's like, it's sort of half and half in the sense of when I say just reaction content, there's a lot of times where I'll get stuck on bits because I don't sometimes I'll have good, funny, inferential leaps, and sometimes I just won't have a lot going on. And it has helped me a lot in the creative process to center it on this is reaction content. Like, it helps distill almost the framework of what I'm going for, because it helps me get back to, am I trying to reveal hidden information to the viewer, which is getting into more edutainment, or am I trying to distill a certain emotion that I feel when I'm looking at the card? And so framing it as just heavy air quotes around it reaction content in my head can help me uncomplicate it if I've spent like 4 hours trying to figure out the perfect word to cap off one joke and I'm just digging way too deep for something that isn't really there. It sort of helps me center on what is the point of the thing that I'm doing. And then a lot of effort and everything goes into it. So it certainly is very high effort and at times very high quality reaction content, but it's sort of like everything stems from a couple different branches, right? Like evolutionary branches of content. So I'm really just attributing to what is the like shared ancestor for the stuff that I make.
Yeah, I definitely, I get that. I feel like the harder I think about what I make and the more I try to make it like this philosophical savant nonsense, the more walls I end up hitting. So
Yeah,
definitely makes sense
is my favorite reactor, you know.
Yeah, Socrates made React content. Like, that's the thing, is that, like, I think the number of click farmers and like really oh, we're getting bleeped now. The number of Asmongold lookalikes have really given React content a bad name. But my man Socrates, right? That's who I'm throwing the dubs up to when I make React content.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One time I burnt my hand on a hot lantern. I reacted to the pain, you know.
Why didn't you do that on stream?
Yeah, where's the TikTok?
You just need a camera.
That spoke to the human experience.
I watched your most recent. I was watching some of your videos in preparation for this podcast, and I saw your most recent one on Karn. I was so mad. Can you summarize your? Oh, so okay, hang on, wait, hold on. For the viewers at home, I'm gonna read what Karn does. So Karn the Betrayer is 3 in a red for a 5/1 Astartes Berserker. He attacks each combat if able. When you lose control of Karn, you draw 2 cards. If damage would be dealt to Karn, prevent that damage, and an opponent of your choice gains control of it.
Okay, so when I saw Karn, the intuitive thought that the reflexive thought that the roast was built from was, wow, this is a Santa's Workshop commander. And what I mean by that is I think he has
Santa's Workshop.
I think he has a lot of very cool interactions that you can get up to because of that lose control of clause and the fact that he prevents damage that's dealt to him. And I also, when I think about the average commander game that I participate in, I'm like, wow, this guy probably hangs out. Like when I think about mono red crash out commanders, which he's not exclusively a crash out commander, but because he has to attack or block whenever he can, he's in some ways a crash out commander. But compared to like Slicer or Alexios, who I had very recently done a roast on, who get past every upkeep versus Karn, you can plan who's going to get him. You can sort of stop him from being able to swing. One of my first thoughts was like, wow, this is the only commander I've ever seen that's just hard stopped by Sapience. Like, wow, do the people at your table have a higher level of consciousness? Karn's not getting up to it. And you can get around that with Voltron, but one thing that, like, sometimes I'll give love to combos or card synergies that'll make a commander super crazy. With Karn, a lot of it in my mind fell under the category of Santa's Workshop, in the sense of like, oh man, if I get Pyrohemia and Homeward Path, it's kicking off. And every other game, I'm going to hang out. Or you could Voltron him. And Voltron Karn probably gets pretty scary, just like everybody that you give a gun to. And so that was a lot of and I'm sure that I'm missing stuff with him, because I always do. And that's something that I used to get very, very nervous about, and now kind of accept, in part because I've accepted that I do reaction content, and so I place a little bit more weight on my own intuitive reaction to the card. But my like gut reaction was, this guy looks so cool. He probably gets shot in the head and just spins for like 45 minutes.
Now, in Warhammer Tabletop, that is very correct. But he kind of just gets knocked out in rage. I considered building Karn, and I had a very different thought, and I actually thought he was too powerful for a casual table because of the play patterns he does. In my mind, this is one of the most busted politics cards in the game.
Oh,
this
yeah.
is trade secrets.
Oh, I agree with you totally. I mean, that's why I called him Red Ristic Study, and I didn't have like 20 minutes to film about that, but yeah, bro probably gets insufferable. Like as soon as you have and this is one of the things that I stopped at, like I called it hard countered by Sapiens because I thought it was funny, but the dark side of it is as soon as you have people that have a repeatable way to pass Karn back and forth.
You mono red trade secrets.
Yeah, make
exactly.
a plan with each other. Yes, I am 100% with you that gets ridiculous.
You play vehicles, and then when you pass it to an opponent, you can then instant speed threaten effect to yoink it back to you, tap it with the vehicle, so when it gets passed back to the opponent, they never have to block with it, so you and that opponent can keep making the same deal and passing it back and forth for the whole game. It's I think this commander's actually like busted. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, and obviously, I'm sorry, I should clarify. I'm being I'm exaggerating here. I don't actually have beef, and I don't actually care whether or not you like this commander. Sure.
That's so funny. I didn't think about that Karn synergy where you just like absolutely ruin the blunt rotation by just passing it back and forth between two people.
Yeah.
You don't put equipment on this guy. You just pass it back to the same person. You're like, hey, you and me, we're 1v1ing, and we're gonna have a billion cards.
You and I are winning this game of Commander.
I love Trade Secrets. That's so cool. For those that don't know, there's a banned card called Trade Secrets that you draw 4 cards, is it? So opponent draws 2, and then they can draw 2. Like, you can just keep passing it back and forth and keep drawing more and more.
Yeah. It was in a precon.
It was in a precon, yeah. It was in the Riku one, wasn't it?
Also, I wanted to briefly bring up, because you mentioned it, missing things. On the last podcast, the 3 of us missed something. We mentioned Command Beacon with Titania, and we were confused as to why it was so popular in there. It goes infinite with Food Chain. All of us totally missed that, and we got so many comments about it.
I would like to mention that I invoked my right to remain silent on that one. I am not a Titania gamer. I did not say a word.
I mean, why would you even play green?
I believe Merit Lage, like 5 of them. But yeah, that was a oversight for sure.
Honestly, I don't even remember Titania coming up. So if I said something that was in some sort of fugue state,
that didn't happen.
It was Khan, but you know, we take responsibility.
Khan had this conversation by themselves, and then is now blaming it on Elkin.
This is crazy.
I'll bear the collective responsibility. That's fine. That's fine.
When I just like say wrong information, you guys got to say something.
One of my favorite things is that I have joined the war on misinformation on the side of misinformation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love lying for fun. So that does bring me just like one small last question before you jump into our main sort of podcast topic here. Is like, what's the process of like breaking down a commander into a bunch of horrific jokes for 60 seconds?
I wish that it looked a little bit more regimented, and it is getting a little bit more regimented now. So I've just been able to go full time. The last day at my job was Friday. A tooth, by the way, broke out of my head that night because my insurance ended on Monday. So my molar was apparently like, we got to go now. We gotta go now. So I have a temporary crown in my head right now. But anyway, a thing that my producer had been advising me about was the like proper noun meta, which is that a lot of my videos, particularly the ones that seem to do better, do best when I say this commander is, and then it's air quotes, and then it is a like description of them, but as given by like a naughty genie or something, right? Like it's some type of just really weird metaphor that gives you a little bit of whiplash. And they've talked about like these are really good because all of these roasts people are scrolling to. And that type of immediate comedic whiplash will break them out. And a lot of my jokes, I'm Shyamalaning myself. And I do mean that negatively. Like, I am always trying to be subversive or overly clever to the detriment of the joke when I look at it in hindsight. And so now the process has begun to look more and more like try to almost meditate on like what is the proper noun of this commander to encapsulate their, whether it's a feeling, whether it's the play pattern, or whether it's just something they look like. And then from the proper noun, establish the type of person that plays the commander, then establish why they play that commander, and then establish what the people they play that commander against are going to do to them, and then whether or not I'd hit it. And that sounds really simple. I've adhered to that structure a big old 0 times. But that having that structure is almost like jazz, where having the rules then gives me spots to flex and break them in. A lot of the best ones, another, which, God, I don't want to say this for the internet, but another thing that really helped was at one point someone described it to me as like, oh yeah, these are like bad white boy freestyle raps almost, because there's meant to be like a narrative quality and a rhythm to them. And so a lot of the best ones have been written after I will find a song that I think is like theme music for the commander, and I will just loop that song, and I have a little sketchbook where I draft everything, and I just sort of stream of consciousness write until I find lines where I think the words are fitting together really good, and then I just grab the best ones out of there. And so the best ones are written as sort of these like bastard children of freestyle raps and then Gantt charts.
I want to see that notebook.
I have, for a couple conventions, I have fans sign it. But I also write only in cursive, and so it's very hard for anybody to... I got that code shit going on.
What? You write only in cursive?
It's because of the... if I force myself to write in cursive, it slows my writing down a little bit, and it gives my brain time to sort of like lay the... Y'all motherfuckers watch Bleach? That's my one swear for the hour. Check it. And you guys watch Bleach? Oh my god, never mind.
I may or may not have like a hate relationship with Bleach.
Oh, we can fight later. It's just like laying the bricks in the road as I'm walking in front of it, and if I write like as fast as I can, I'll start tripping over the words in my head. But if I write in cursive, I have to write slower, and it gives me like just enough time to let the next word come without interrupting the overall flow of the whole thing.
I literally cannot read cursive. Like, I'm so dyslexic and barely literate as is. If anything isn't like slightly squiggly wording, I cannot interpret.
Yeah, so I've got the Dead Sea Scrolls for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You get too many serifs in your fonts and you're having trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have another question I've just been curious about. Is there a motivating factor behind what becomes a short and what becomes a relatively short normal YouTube video?
There used to be, before YouTube made an update to its monetization, for a really long time, it was no matter how long or short I would aim to make the video, or how long or how many jokes I thought I had about a commander, I was like physically incapable of making something that wasn't 90 seconds, give or take 15. Just everything hung out in like 75 seconds to 100-second range. And then I started posting on YouTube because I had had success on TikTok, and everyone told me if you want to go full time, go to YouTube because they pay you money. And I was worried that nobody would click into a video that was 90 seconds long, because at the time shorts were only 60 seconds. And so there was a push for a number of months where I would film 2 different versions of roasts, and I would make sure that there was a version that was short enough that it could go on YouTube under a minute so that I could build up a fan base. And now, it was only just a couple weeks ago actually, where YouTube changed it so that if you post a video that's under 3 minutes, it's published as a video, but people can scroll to it in the shorts feed so long as it is in that, like, if it's in the vertical aspect ratio. So if you do wide shot, nobody's scrolling to it. But if you do square or taller, I guess is the right word, it can go in the shorts feed too. So now I just sort of do whatever feels right and then let it rock. But a lot of it does just come down to what the story of that commander in my head ends up being. And I would say the biggest determining factor is there a cutaway I want to do? Because a lot of which doesn't even cut away from the card, but there's a lot of times now where I'll like pretend to be an adversarial party. Or there was one that I enjoyed recently where I think I was talking about like symmetrical sacrifice effects, and I was like a stereotypical Dimir player, and I just like put on a bathrobe and held up a chicken and talked about sacrificing this so that I could kill your firstborn son Jeremy. And like setting those up, right, doesn't take a lot of time.
True equivalent
but
exchange.
Yeah, but versus something that's going to be like 59 seconds.
You gotta be quick for a short.
Yeah, it's very meaningfully different.
Yeah.
Like 59 seconds of talking, you got like 4 sentences.
Yeah.
You have like 4 sentences to make that happen.
Yeah, I've made one YouTube short, and like I got super crunched at the end of it. I was like, okay, I gotta speed read these 2 lines to make it fit.
Yep. I also used to talk a lot faster. Like once I had enough of an audience that they would click into the videos on YouTube, which totally coincidentally pay you like 6 times as much. But that's like neither here nor there.
Shorts monetization is like, yeah, worth it.
That's the reason I stopped posting those puppies.
Yeah, here's $1. And
Dude,
so
we have it good as Magic creators because we don't have like other like monetization issues. I have a friend who runs the channel Airsofting Wrong, so he gets a way lower CPM, and he's got like 10 million, 50 million views on some of these shorts, and it's like $20.
That's insane. Yeah, because mine are like, I think it's like $1 per 1,000.
See that for a short? That's really good.
That would be really good for a short.
It's less than that, but it's not like I think my best shorts are like 500K views, and they've made like $300, which is ridiculous still.
Yeah,
but
no, that's really good for a short. Yeah, we haven't really lucky on that sense.
I feel like it's like a 15th or a 20th per view for mine I've looked at, so it's not good.
Oh yeah, it's barely anything. Like if it's so yeah, once I had to close the loop on the thought process behind it, it was mostly I want this to be a short because I am not established yet, and I doubt people will click on these if it's just like a dude poorly green screened in front of a card, but they might listen to it if they scroll to it. And then once I started to get a little bit more traction and I had confidence that people were going to click into the video, then I just did whatever came natural, and that involved slowing down my cadence, and I started to extend some of the bits. And so now I just kind of do whatever. And if there's ever a commander where I think the story of them is very, very simple, they'll probably be a short again, but it's a lot more rare nowadays.
That makes sense, yeah. Shorts is a good outreach method, or it's an okay outreach method, but definitely the money is in the longer.
Let's move on to our main topic, and this is maybe a little nebulous. I'm actually not certain what I'm going to title the podcast yet, but it's generally like, can you trust content creators or Magic YouTubers to have information that is good for you to utilize? So, for example, I think it depends on the creator, and I'll use MTG Goldfish as an example. Just to be very clear, I love MTG Goldfish. They're really great. Absolutely nothing
I
wrong.
was about to say grime. You never lead into a I want to be so clear before this drops. It's all love.
But if you look at their Commander content, they have their own ban list and they have their own play group, which is specifically in that they're creating decks for content. So when Richard, for example, says, "Oh, I don't play spot removal," that's because he knows with 100% certainty, like, that his opponent, who's on, Crab Tribal, doesn't have some random combo as a backup. So he can cut all spot removal because he knows that they're just not going to do that for certain. But if he was playing in like a wider meta, he might, see more things that require spot removal, and then his deck would have to change. And then I see people apply that logic that people use. Oh, this content creator said this, so I do this, and then it just doesn't mesh well with when I see them in the wild.
Yeah, I think the best, most useful lens for this metric for today's episode is talking a bit about metas. And specifically, we can start with the YouTuber meta that exists out there, right, for each of these channels, and then sort of move it into like talking about your personal meta. I feel like that's gonna like have the most like takeaway for everyone. Yeah,
well, why don't you tell us about your personal meta then?
It's pretty brutal over there at OMG Collectibles. That, man, I've been playing there for the last like few years. That shop rocks. Very cool local place that I go to. And let me tell you, there's some people there, and they love to Helm of Obedience people and slam your face into the concrete and generally just combo you to the ground. So I have had to have very interactive decks to help combat that.
Yeah, I think is this the part where we all just like yell at each other?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you could just jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a really important facet of that is that the jockeying for position that often happens during a game of Commander can feel really intense and interesting to be playing in it, and it, by God, is it terrible to watch. And I think that influences most of the difference between a content meta and a like local gameplay meta, because, or even just like an IRL meta, is if you have a bunch of very interactive decks, it can feel very, very invigorating to worry about, okay, what is my next turn going to look like? How do I get this past everybody else? How do I think they're going to pop off? But if you just have a top-down camera, it's a bunch of nothing ever being established on the board. And unless you are already so emotionally invested in that game that you're doing the exact same level of like beautiful mind planning ahead, it just looks boring. Because another thing about content games is a lot of them are second screen, which is a term that just refers to like most people aren't sitting down and watching a content game as the primary thing they are focused on. They are sitting down and they have a desk job and they're watching it in their ear pods while they work their desk job. They're eating their breakfast. They're doing the dishes. And so almost like serialized TV shows or procedural shows where they sort of re-summarize everything every 10 minutes for you to make sure you don't get lost. Content shows are doing the same thing with how they build their interaction. They want the board state to have this steady progression. They want there to be a big finish. They don't want to reset over and over and over again because they need it to be watchable and enjoyable for somebody who's not all there.
I think the big finish is definitely an interesting one, because that I think has a lot to do with what people expect when they look at a game. People have come to expect kind of Commander's format where these big cool plays happen and you have these big bombastic finales. And if you're playing a kind of grindy game where everybody is, minding their removal well and, just trying to get a little bit ahead with their value engines and keep a single thing on board, then it's not living up to that kind of
death
explosive.
by 2 damage pecks.
Yeah.
You do not get the 10-turn clock in Commander very often.
Yeah, Spartacus comes out to remind you that you lost a 2-for-1 5 turns ago, and so now you're gonna die when the other person's at 8 health. Yeah, those are...
Yeah.
Oh man. No, I feel like we've totally hit the nail on the head a little bit. To toot our own horn, 100%, by the way.
Right, of course.
Where
four unbiased content creators talk about.
I feel like that our opinion is flawless, actually, and brilliant. I feel the best term is like it's like Flanderized. It's really weird. Like we're seeing like scrubbed clean Commander. No one's watching game nights and the fifth like farewell has hit the table. You know what I mean? It's always like, I cast Rise of the Dark Realms and I bring back everyone's creatures, and then there's like a big flashy animation that plays, which totally happens in real life when you cast that card. And then
I make sound effects when I cast big spells.
I think I do too, but I do it completely subconsciously. I definitely roar when I hit someone with like a giant monster or something.
When I Psych Rift for the 20th time, I'm like zoop, 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 zoop.
I'm sure your opponents love that. Oh man. No,
I do want to. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I yield.
This is all the crap that gets cut out.
Beautiful. I do want to take a moment to talk about one thing I think is a good outcome of the content meta, which is something I'm going to call the frequency meta. I think how often you play is a really big determinant, perhaps even bigger than the types of decks you're playing against, just because I review a lot of viewer submitted decks. I think I average like 50 a month at this point. And so I see a lot of different decks, and a lot of people will also tell me like, oh, this is what I think the problem with this deck is. It doesn't go off reliably enough. It's losing to these types of decks. And one thing I notice a lot is people that get to play a lot of Magic are much more okay with having top-heavy disaster decks that only go off if all of the stars align and Mercury is in retrograde, versus people that get to play Magic only every once in a while. Winning's not actually that important to them, but what's very important is getting to feel like they played Magic the Gathering. And a lot of content decks are built to be very threatening, maybe respond to one thing, but do their thing. And then they can get blown out of the water by a bigger fish doing their thing even harder. But whenever I play with content decks versus a deck that is trying to win, I do typically always feel like I got to play Magic. It almost never is the best Magic. It almost never is super competitive Magic. But because everyone is built to flop something huge on the table at some point, they are good about guaranteeing that you feel like you got to play a game. And so that kind of approach, I think, can be valuable for someone who doesn't get to play often and wants to feel visceral participation in the game. Now, if you just built a good deck, you would also get that, but shut up.
I think that's really interesting because like a lot of the problems people have with when they talk about like, oh, there's too much removal or stack slows me down or blah, 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 I'm not getting to do something. I always feel like if you're doing something but you have no capacity to stop someone from doing something bigger than you are also not doing anything. But people generally, like at least that's, for me, that's the feeling I get, right? But generally, people seem to not feel that way. They're like, oh, I ramped into my 8-drop, and then somebody ramped harder into their 12-drop and won. Your 8-drop didn't really matter, but you felt like it did because you cast it. Which I think is, I don't know, it's just like a disconnect between, I feel like, how I play and how I feel like a lot of people play.
Well, counterpoint, my thing is the biggest and coolest, so what are you talking about? And that's, but like, I think that is the unironic subconscious level of a lot of people, is getting to do any level of proactive thing, even if it is immediately blown out of the water, feels better to some than a reactive thing. On a personal level, I am with you. One of my favorite matchups to play is a control mirror, because I'm just wrong in the head.
Oh yeah.
But like that's one of my favorite types of Magic, is like Azorius v Azorius, and we're just grinding it out over the most meaningless decisions. But for a lot of people, like Commander really is board game meets show and tell. And one thing that I've found when I look at people's deck lists is they really want to feel like they are injecting theatrics and their personality through the cards in a very safe for work way. And that's definitely influenced by the content meta, because you see creators that you like or you identify with playing, and in, again, very edited and contrived clips. And you're like, oh, people like me that much, which is a very bad parasocial thought process that we can get into on the next 18 episodes of this podcast that I'll definitely be here for.
Hey, I have 62 hours of disk space remaining for recording.
Let's go! But so I think like a big deal for a lot of people is stopping someone else from doing something, even if it is like a move towards winning the game, doesn't feel like proactive playing of Magic. It feels like being the group mom or group dad.
I know I'm a huge cheerleader for people building consistent and resilient decks, and I try to basically all of the advice I give is pushing toward those two things, because I want people to have the sorts of decks that do well against a lot of interaction. Because I have that experience of, playing the deck that feels like it always gets to do something. I have a couple decks in particular where it feels like every time I play them, win or lose, I have fun. I get to do a thing. I feel like I'm, having a good time because I've built them to put so much focus on, being super consistent in their rollouts and what they do, and then also being able to recover from setbacks and have kind of multiple plans and such. So I know I want more people to have that feeling, and I will always be a cheerleader of people building decks to try and achieve that. And I definitely don't want it to ever come off as like a kind of blamey sort of thing, where like, oh, you should be building decks like this. You'd be having fun if you did. Come on. But I just like it to be a gentle push. Come on, you'll have more fun.
Yeah, there's like, okay, there's this like idea I've been like mulling around in my head. I think it was Snail who introduced me to the topic of like a dessert deck, where like, this is my cool synergy pile, I built it myself, this is like a from scratch brew, this is my deck, right? And then there's a totally different thing where it's like, I really like big like mana in mono black, and it's like, okay, I'm going to put Cabal Coffers in this deck, I'm going to play Grey Merchant of Asphodel, and I'm going to loop it, and that is not unique in any way, shape, or form, but it's something I like to do, and no other format is hospitable to it. So I have to do it here, right? And I'm sort of losing my train of thought. No, where did it go? Come back to
Anyway, this has been interviewing the guy who pees behind the 7-Eleven. I just really like to do it, so it has to be here. I think you were
resilient decks. There you go. Okay, it's
meat
back.
And potatoes or vegetables versus a dessert deck.
Lightning bolt struck me, and it's back now. Yeah, no. So you have this like, I want a big mono black rampy deck. That's like my Iara deck. I have a life drain deck. The second a torpor orb hits the battlefield, I am dead. I cannot do anything against that permanent. I can like attack you with 2/2 zombies. That's like the extent of my influence in that game. And it's totally fine to have a fragile deck like that. Because I don't want to run Intro to Annihilation or Meteor Golem, which might be the correct... Meteor Golem's not actually a good answer to Torpor Orb. but
it's a 1-for-1. Mana's not real.
Torpor Orb cancels the ETB. It's a 7-mana 3/3.
That's not true. If you just eat the card before they can read it and tell them it's destroyed.
Yes. So... should I be running Intro to Annihilation? Probably. But I think it's totally fine to have a fragile deck in a meta, and just like, yeah, I own it. It happens. So long as you, use the complaint equity responsibly.
I mean, I have friends that like acknowledge, they're like, yeah, this is my deck where if the commander is removed twice, game is over for me. And they just load it with protection, and they know they're either going to go ballistic and crush everybody or do nothing. And they're fine with that, and they acknowledge it, and they, build somewhat around it to, help in some capacity. And then they're fine with that. If you're totally fine with that, like, all right, have fun.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want this to come across at all as like we're talking down to decks that like, you know, are really all eggs in all one basket or not resilient, because you can totally have one of those decks, love it to death, and then, you know, it's totally fine when you get blown out of the water, you know, and then like you can still laugh and have a good time. And your deck isn't like non-functioning per se.
I have a Torsten deck that I just played the other day, and I had fun, but it was a horribly inconsistent deck as usual. And I live with that whenever I play the deck.
Sorry, what is this commander?
Is it the
Torsten,
7-mana one?
founder of Benalia. It's
You made that name up.
This card is
it's
right
one of the
now.
best. This is one of the best sneak attack or flash targets in Vintage Cube. Sorry, that's
it's a 7-mana 7/7 that draws you 7 cards if your deck's entirely creatures and lands, which mine is.
Oh, Snail
so-
And then when he
After
dies,
dark.
he makes 7/1/1s. Yeah.
Yeah. The deck. That the only draw on the deck is Torsten, and then I blink him, and that's it. If I don't hit 7 mana, I am having a really bad time. If my mana dorks get wiped, I'm having a really bad time. If my Torsten gets countered, I'm having a
my
really bad time.
That's amazing. This is the most battle cruiser strategy I've ever heard you build.
Oh, it's a combo deck.
Oh, it's a combo deck.
It's a stupid
Oh,
deck.
this is the Fiend Hunter.
This is the Fiend Hunter deck. Yes.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
You said
okay.
Fiend
brother
Hunter
said
suddenly
I
every-
draw my deck by flickering my
Well, so-
commander, and you went, what a
it's a
goofy silly time.
I have to draw a lot of cards because I don't have tutors, and I have to find 3 different Fiend Hunters and loop them. So I have to draw like 40% of my deck in order to get there.
I'm sorry, is your deck pooping back and forth forever deck?
It's just 3 Fiend
Oh my
Hunters
God.
the
having a
classic
good
2
time
Oblivion
hunting
rings,
fiends.
nothing else on the battlefield, crash Magic the Gathering online.
That's horrifying.
It's a stupid deck.
Sorry, when I heard Torsten, I was thinking like you had a really fair 99. I'm just here crashing with my 7/7. I'm gonna like explode people with creatures. Maybe you
Oh,
get
no.
spicy to a Primal Surge.
No, I built too many versions of that deck. I couldn't build another battlecruiser deck.
Sorry, I've had a question that I just completely kept forgetting to ask because I'm an awesome podcast host. I am curious. We were talking about these games where you sort of want to build up an advantage for the camera, right? These like live games or on camera games, and I'm wondering if they don't run removal because it's contrary to the story, or because removal isn't very popular. But I'm wondering if removal isn't very popular because of the content that people are watching, new people getting into the format. And this is like sort of like an Ouroboros self-eating tale here, where people don't see removal in their content, so they don't put it in their decks. They just put explosive stuff in their decks. And so, you know, like sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yo, I'm taking notes. This is so good for my next video.
I think there's a point to that, but one thing I will say to it is of all of the many and illustrious shows I've been on, half of one, but across the board, any gameplay show I've been involved with, there's a lot less, and of course I'm not familiar with Goldfish, but there's a lot less of not bringing removal, and there's a lot more of sitting on removal that you had at a pivotal moment because we're not filming 2 more hours.
Yeah, I get that.
That makes sense.
You don't
And
fire
so
the
that,
farewell.
Yeah, it's like, I have this Assassin's Trophy and I could stop this pivotal thing, but then it does become, for the next 2 hours, we grind value 1 point of life at a time. And most people, whether directed to or not, because I've both seen it directed and I've seen it just be a solo call by whoever's piloting the deck that could have responded, where they built a responsible deck and they're like, I had it, but also what are the consequences of me having it, and what are the consequences for this as a piece of entertainment? But then I do think in terms of like a black box, it loops into what you said of people see it in a piece of content, begin replicating it, and learn to expect it. And oh my God, does YouTube hate if you ever do different things than what you already did?
Oh, that's
And
so true.
I don't think they recognize it on like the level of granularity as what happens in an individual game of Commander, but I do think there's a lot of the big flashy games probably get more views because when it goes down to grinding out point by point, because it's second screen, people start disengaging with it. And so of course the metrics go better for stuff that has a reliable build up and then has this big flashy finish. Because it's like why pop music is good. They did a study where they looked at like the reward centers of the brain while people were listening to different types of music, because they were like, like pop music is catchy, but there's other music that's really, really good. And our brains reward us more if we internally predict what we think is going to come next and then we're right. Even if it's not as like creatively interesting, our brains want to feel like, oh, we're so smart. We knew that was going to happen. So when the Kinnan player makes infinite mana, even though we can all know like, okay, the Kinnan's going to flip infinitely and win, whatever. When we see the Kinnan flip infinitely with the activated ability and win, our brain goes, good boy. You get a little pepperoni treat. Versus if somebody fires off Assassin's Trophy and then the turn stops, I don't know how you'd stop Kinnan. I don't play CDH. Shut up. But if somebody does stop it, even though it's like a technically more interesting game because more complicated stuff is happening, our brain goes, oh, you were wrong.
You unplugged the fidget toy.
Yeah, you're dumb and stupid and bad. And that's not even like a conscious feedback loop. That's just how we react as people to wanting to make predictions and be right about them.
This is how you can tell that the gameplay that I do on stream is not scripted and not fake. There's like one that's like 2.5 hours. It's one game.
Oh.
And I think I'm dead for like half of it.
The first piece of gameplay me and Khan did together, we got like knocked out in the first like 30 minutes, and we're both like on Theros gods. We're just kind of chatting for the rest of the game.
You were just watching two other people play Magic.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't fake any of that stuff. If the game's boring, game's boring.
Yeah, so that was 14 minutes of yes, I agree with those sentences, Elk, and we can move on.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if it's entirely correct to say that, removal is, like, oh, it's all because of, these doggone, players online. Because, like, it's nice to assume that, and it's like, oh, you can shake your fist at anything. But it's also just, like, removal kind of feels bad in Commander. You're targeting one specific player. It's a 1-for-1 in a multiplayer game. Like, there's more things against it. But that's definitely something I've thought about before, is, like,
I feel so... maybe I'm just, like, a psychopath, but
I love taking away toys.
For the
I
opposite.
love it so much.
Yeah.
But
No.
I get why people don't.
It's like you get to be more impactful in the game. Nothing feels worse than when somebody's like, do my thing, I win, and then everybody else just goes okie dokie, and then they like go home. Like, that's like such a boring game. Even if it was the expected result. Yes, they tapped and untapped Krenko 12 times and nobody had a board wipe. So yeah, of course they won.
I love the Massacre Worm coming down. That's like my magic.
Yeah, exactly. The big blowout removal crazy things. And like when I'm holding up a counter spell and I'm like, all right, do I do it on this? Do I do it on this? Do I do it on that? If I use it here, do I not have it for this player? It like forces me to be more engaged in the game as opposed to me just tapping out, here's my big thing, and I'm gonna hope nobody else plays anything bigger, and if they do, I just can't do anything else
that
about
is
it.
Such
and I feel like it's
a good observation.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's such a good observation that you just made, where it's like, technically a counterspell is like card disadvantageous, but it's decision advantageous. Like, you are making a million more decisions per game with that counterspell in your hand than you would have been if you just tapped out.
I'm up dopamine on this. I agree wholeheartedly, because one time somebody built a deck and they were like, oh, do you want to try it? And I said yes, and it was like Maelstrom Wanderer Karuga Companion, and they were like, it's awesome, you're going to love it, you're going to draw so many cards because blue player teehee. and they said the gimmick is the deck plays at sorcery speed, and I wanted to pull my eyeballs out by the time I was done playing, because all that happened every turn was I would do the biggest, flashiest thing imaginable, and then I would pass to 3 people as they cast like sorcery speed murder and kill whatever I had done, and I just never had anything to say about it. And it was one of the worst game, like, and I think that is the heart of the difference, is it was one of the worst gameplay experiences ever. As a piece of content, people were like, haha, that's so funny. Yeah. And so there is a big difference between what feels good to do as a player versus what it feels satisfying to watch.
One of these days we're gonna be able to like record the inside of people's brains, and you can like feel their thought process as they're thinking about the counterspell in their hand, and then that's gonna make removal have a big comeback.
I mean, I think the difference would be if you could make Magic gameplay entertaining enough that it was first screen content, then I think interactive gameplay would become in vogue. I think the biggest difference is that very few people that are watching Commander gameplay content are watching it as the primary thing they're putting their attention on.
You gotta up the animation budget for that.
I mean, like, yes. I don't know how you would do it. I tried to stream gameplay for a while, and I stopped doing it because I was getting really busy and like things had to go on the cutting board, and I just couldn't make it any good. Like, I could not find a way to make it feel compelling. And I know that some people have more success. I mean, basically everybody that does it has more success than I did with it. But I think it's really hard to get people. Yeah, like, it's so hard to get people as invested in the, like, maybe if you could show everybody's hands, because I think the hands being hidden information prevents a lot of those
really
like micro decision predictions. But yeah,
I want to do highlights of like some of the gameplay videos. I had like a crazy moment in a Patreon game like last week where somebody was doing a life swap deck and they had a veto out and they were doming the dude for like 44 and he went to cast deflecting swap to move the 44 damage back to the original guy. And we were like, oh my god, it's over. And then one other dude was like, because it's a webcam Magic game, he's like, well, your commander's not in play. Remember, I stole it. And he goes, uh-oh.
Oh my god. See,
and didn't have enough mana for the deflecting swap.
And one thing I actually have on my docket to try to do as I expand, as I go full-time, get plugged on anyway, is...
Yeah, look at the description.
To shoutcast highlight reels like Stephen A. Smith style. Like they do for all the like ESPN Sports Center type shows, because I think that is a way, because like another thing is a lot of the coverage of this game, all we talk about is like details and math, man. And it's rough. The math is good. The math is satisfying. But sometimes like I already asked about anime and got shot down. Do any of y'all watch competitive Smash Bros?
No. So, yes, I watch competitive Smash Bros. Also, I read a ton of manga and I love anime.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't like Bleach. I have read all of Bleach.
Gotcha. Okay.
Every single page, and I
am not a shonen guy, to be clear. I do watch a lot of anime and read a lot of manga, but I'm just not really into shonen too much.
Okay.
Wait, I actually don't know. Alex, do you watch anime or read manga in any capacity?
No, not really.
We're gonna fix you, brother, but we'll pick that up later.
Yeah.
But like,
finish One Piece before the next episode.
But so like in the Smash Bros casting community, there's a lot of casters who are really knowledgeable about all of the important facets of the game, like frame data, character matchups, etc., etc. And you know who they have casting the grand finals every time? It's the same 3 guys, one of whom has a catchphrase that's like, "He's putting the toes on him." I think if we were gonna get this to first screen, it needs to be accessible in a way that it currently isn't, because we're so focused about the details of the game, which in Commander are meaningless because it is monster monopoly.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that people are not like me and don't just like to sit down for a few hours and watch Reed Duke like jam elves all day. this is the thing too, is I don't watch Commander content at all. But I watch so much 60 card content a lot. And
That's because the type of person who consumes 60 card content likes the math and the subtle intricacies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's not a casual game, and it's not a casual watching experience.
I really had this like strange like moment where like a lot of people, when my friends post deck lists in our little group server, they'll be like, oh, here's some cool synergy for your value engine. I'm like, have you considered cutting a forest for a mountain? I feel like the man is a little off. Like, that's where I really started to realize that I'm not thinking about the game in the same way as some other people are.
Also, nobody in the podcast can realize this, but your Discord profile picture is killing me whenever you talk like that. It's a little elk with its hands crossed, like in a real dainty way. And so especially the sentence about, you guys, you gotta cut that forest. You're never gonna fix the pips for Raga Draga like that.
Yeah, oh man, I got this art from one of my friends. It was super sweet. Anyway, that's off topic.
It's very cute, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of different personality types that clash over Magic because the art's cool and the math's cool. And it's not often that you have a game like that.
Do we want to do any closing thoughts here before we move to the question
I'm
zone?
not gonna lie, I forgot the question zone even existed.
We got to get to my fanfic. What are we talking about?
That is it for disjointed conversation. I hope I've gotten a lot of mixed feedback about the more structured episodes versus the less structured episodes. So please leave comments about that. We're still just doing different things. But now we're going to move on to the question zone where we answer questions from you, the viewer. So if you want to leave a question for us, you can put it in the comments on Spotify or YouTube. We now have access to the Spotify comments. Thanks, Spotify, for fixing that. Just put question zone at somewhere in there so we can find it more easily. I also want to make one note. If your question is about a guest potentially appearing on the podcast, the answer to everything is maybe. We don't hate anybody. Nobody is banned from the podcast. We just also don't know a lot of people, and a lot of people don't know who we are. So there's a good chance they just don't know about the podcast, or we don't know about them. And that might be why they're not on. But there's no hard no's, and we have a few other people lined up.
I don't know. I really hate, and then I would be talking like this, and you could bleep it all out in post, and then you guys could all act all disgusted afterward.
You are welcome to do that bit while this loads.
Well, I just did kind of. You could cut that to make it sound awful.
Oh, see, I was gonna come in with a bit of yeah, me and Trinket finally squashed the beef, so I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, that's crazy. We still have beef. What the hell? You didn't answer my DMs from earlier today.
Wait, what?
Titania.
Everyone's correcting you.
Every comment.
There was 20 comments about Titania last episode.
Oh, you ever heard of Titania? Idiot.
Question zone from Yenchitan7276. We talked about Myriad Landscape on the previous episode. They're asking, what are our thoughts on Blighted Woodland as an alternative to Myriad Landscape?
Can you read the card out?
Oh yeah, I should do that. I always forget to do that. That's the other thing that people in the Spotify comments say is they're I can't see the card.
It taps for colorless.
Blighted Woodland. Yeah, Blighted Woodland is a land that taps for colorless, enters untapped, and you can pay 3 and a green, tap, sacrifice it, search your library for 2 basic lands. They come onto the battlefield tapped.
You have to pay 5 mana for it.
Yo, that's peak.
It hurts. Okay, mono green landfall deck, maybe. Especially if you have a Seedborn Muse in the package. I could see it happening. But
I mean, I think I mean, it's definitely for decks that suck. But a thing that decks that suck need is stuff to do when you have too much mana. This is what I've learned from playing Draft, because I'm a really bad player. And the way I've tried to get better is by playing Limited. And having some type of flood protection can be useful. And so I've become more and more affectionate towards hilariously overcosted and bad abilities if it's just like, hey, game action. Game action, baby.
Oh.
My hand's dead. Who cares? Game action.
Absolutely.
Dopamine.
Little
Neuron activation.
Little Foundation Limited tip on the side here. Goblin Negotiation is like the most flexible card in that format. It's early game removal. Late game, make like 12 goblins or something stupid.
This is the card you gotta read out. You can't just say Goblin
Goblin Negotiation's like... Yeah.
Red X for a sorcery. Deals X damage to target creature, and then you make a number of 1/1 gobos equal to the amount of excess damage dealt to the creature this way.
So I think, I agree that Blighted Woodland is like mono green landfall. I would also stretch for like Gruul or Simic could probably care about it, and any further than that is we got to put the pipe down.
I run Blighted Woodland in exactly one deck, and it's perfect there. It's in my Rada deck. It's an explosive vegetation because it's effectively 4 mana if I am trying to play it on curve, because I can just attack with Rada. It's like one of the few instant speed things I can do.
Attack with Rod is so huge.
So in that very specific case, I highly recommend it, but that is not broadly applicable advice.
Attack with Rod Hot, crack Blighted Woodland is a crazy cool play.
Simply attack with Rada. That's all you got to do to make Blighted Woodland good. Come on, guys.
Rod Hot is a 2-mana mana dork that when she attacks makes 2 red mana, but it isn't like Burgy mana where it's like it doesn't go away as steps and phases end.
Yeah.
You have to use
it's not
it.
that newfangled stuff.
You have to use it.
Blighted Woodland probably pretty bad outside of that.
Yeah.
But
I like that it enters untapped, which I think makes it so much better than Myriad Landscape, but
that's not true.
So much better.
The land itself. The land itself. I thought you were saying the lands you search for.
Oh no.
The lands you search for were untapped.
If it was a Sky Shroud claim,
yeah.
Oh.
If I want fixing in my decks, like with Myriad Landscape, by the way, I'll typically, like, if I'm not using Myriad Landscape as ramp, oh man, I've actually been really coming around to like Demolition Field and not Field of Ruin, but Demolition Field especially. I've been really enjoying that card. I might cut Sinkhole and Iara for it because I feel really bad sinkholing land sometimes.
I have one soapbox that I didn't get on that I want to get on for this card, and I swear it'll take like 60 seconds, and I'm practiced at that. I think an important difference between Myriad Landscape and Blighted Woodland is that Blighted Woodland also can only get cracked after some things have gone right for you already, and one of the most common problems I see at the casual level is people build decks based around the notion that things are going to go right for them, and nothing bad has ever happened to them in their entire life. And Myriad Landscape, because you crack it at 2, like that is crackable and will fix at least one color if stuff is going wrong. And that's really important. Whereas Blighted Woodland, you got to 4 mana and you got a specific color, which is a much higher ask. And so it's like, you know, something's already worked out for you if you've cracked Blighted Woodland. Whereas Myriad Landscape is there for you, you know, when you're like sucking down Cheeto dust at the bottom of the barrel.
Oh yeah, Blighted Woodland is a high land count land in my brain. You don't want to run it as like one of your 32 or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, it's the 43rd land for me, like, honestly.
I don't know. I have a deck.
We
with
got
like
a Xanax
46.
dealer over here.
Oh, I'm a 40 land fan. I'm there for it.
Oh, yeah, no, it is the 43rd land for me. I cut it from Mina and Den when I went down to 42 lands. It was a hard cut. I have a 4.
Wow, you went down to 42 lands in a land stack? Come on. You can do better.
I had to play spells.
I had to play spells. That is like crying.
You'll never succeed at lands with that kind of attitude. Come on, Con.
I had to play spells.
Oh, it was so sad. The deck used to have 46 lands. It's really fallen. In question zone from Ham is Good 12. I am illiterate. Oh my god. What commander deck archetypes are your favorite to play against or even lose to?
I am a really big fan. There's a single-digit number of people in the world, and they all know who they are, who have received the Team Year Pass from me. I actually do enjoy, like, Simic or Team Year make stuff decks when the pilots are incredibly on top of their triggers, because it does two things. One, I do like to watch good Magic be played if it doesn't take up 15 minutes a turn. And two, it basically guarantees that I get to Little Bean at all times. Because it puts somebody who's always set up to take the aggro from the table, because they're just doing so much stuff. How could it not be good? And if the person playing the deck like really knows what the deck wants to do, really knows who their priorities are for putting counters on or untapping permanents, if you have some type of loop you're doing, that can actually be really enjoyable for me, because I get to see a good deck function. I don't lose 20 minutes to the void, and I never have to worry about the Assassin's Trophy coming for my commander, because they're just doing so much stuff.
Yeah, I tend to agree that, like, you can really use that to your advantage. Like, one arch enemy, kind of like, I am a turbo ramp Maelstrom Wanderer, like 15 giant creatures a turn type of deck, for your own benefit, because you can kind of like hide behind the giant monster, so to speak, and build your Doomsday engine or what have you without anyone sort of picking it apart. I definitely think my favorite archetype to play against is Stacks. And there's definitely a hard limit. I don't think I'm not jumping for joy, yippee, when a winter orb hits the table. But like trying to find my way out from under a Hushbringer when I'm playing my Aristocrats deck, which Hushbringer stops death triggers. These sorts of interactions are very fun to me, where it's like, oh, I need to like find some way to, get out from under this hate piece to actually start playing the game again. And you can also, this is my favorite thing about things like Hushbringer versus Winter Orb, is you can still develop into them. If you don't have the removal play, you can still play your on death creature. You can still develop your board, move your game plan forward, but you can sort of like, at some point after building up, that Abrade hits really good, and then you like sack like 6 creatures or something. Those sorts of games I really enjoy, when there's just like a hate piece on the board. And you can sort of small bean behind it too, like, oh, none of my creatures do anything, oh, the horror, and then you just like snipe the hate piece out from under your opponent and just like sack a million things. Oh, it's so funny. Anyway, yeah, Stacks, love it.
And away, we just got a 3-minute breakdown of why Elk likes to edge their decks.
Yeah.
I just love when that Aristocrat isn't ready to go off.
Similar-ish answer for me. I really like playing against Group Slug or some adjacent deck that's kind of grindy and low slung, and just I love it when the life totals are like 11 or 8 or something across the board, and everybody is just like clenching their teeth trying to survive. That's good Commander to me.
Oh yeah, critical immediately. None of this like 20 life points of happy sack in the first. No. Yeah.
Absolutely. At least the teens. That's the max.
Yeah, I hate the hacky sack turn, so I'm always happy when it gets to like, oh, blocking really matters. Think about how much you love Yanowar Elves real fast.
Absolutely.
I need more cards like Valgavoth that make Mogus good, because
no, we don't.
Mogus is the most.
We do not need.
Listen, I can't get Mogus to work at any of my tables. I really want Mogus to be good.
It's because the card sucks.
I know, but he's like the most kissable Theros god. So
hey,
it's like,
what's he doing out of the 99? Who let him out?
That's true.
Who let him out of his cage?
He's not even good in the 90s.
Yeah, he's even bad there. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, but he's
like
in like the 99 of a Valgavoth deck, playable. Not at a high level, but like you can find a spot for him. He's spent
Slightly
2 years being
worse
equipment
than
manager.
Vortex.
You moved him up. You moved him up to second string, but as commander, what are we talking about?
It's the Peter principle, where people get promoted just until they are incompetent, and then they don't get promoted anymore.
Yeah.
See, I like that Valgavoth is your example of what needs to make Moog is good. It's got to be something that makes you draw cards. That's what you need to be good in Commander. Make it draw cards. Whatever it is, it needs to draw more cards.
That's true. Also, I just realized Khan hasn't answered the question yet. I feel terrible.
I can just cut all of your answers out, and then it'll be like only I answer the question. I also love playing against stacks. Surprise, surprise. The stacks again, I loved it because, one, I play a lot of Control, and Control crushes stacks. And then I also love watching, especially new players, solve problems. And I love, you can like small beam behind it, and I can be like, oh, this guy's turning off your mana, let's go beat him up. But I love watching new players like attack cards when they hit these like roadblocks, because I find it really interesting, and I think it's like a really good learning experience. So I love seeing it at the table and then helping them like get over the stacks piece. So I love doing that, but my favorite deck to lose to is if you beat me with a card I have never seen before. That is the most fun. When I see like a new card and it pops off and I'm like, yo, this was so cool. Then like I'm pretty happy. Like that's a happy loss because I saw a cool new card do something interesting. What do you find more interesting, having more colors or less colors?
It depends, really. You can have an argument that color identity is worthless and should not exist. And you should try to always secret commander, always put Kenrith in the command zone, 5 color decks. This is the most wacky stuff you can do in Magic. Look at me go. Look at my greedy mana base. I'm insane. But there's something to be said about the restriction of like a single color deck or even a 0 color deck. That I really find tantalizing. Like I really enjoy building a mono white deck and trying to find advantage. It's not hard anymore. Or mono red deck and trying to find a way to like make it more controlling, make it so it's more mid range, something like that. Like building in restriction is always more fun than building without restriction. I feel like a lot of 5 color commanders come down to be boring. Like Kenrith, oh man, like Golos got banned for being literally Mr. Generic. Like no one, like everyone played Golos. Where it gets really fun in commanders with restriction. So I'm thinking like 5 color commanders that are cool. The Niv Mizzet, that whenever you cast a 2 color spell, or rather all your 2 color spells in your graveyard have jumpstart. So you can discard a card to cast them.
Yeah.
I had a friend who played it and it was awesome. But here's the thing is that's a 5 color commander that has a restriction with it. And that's like an instance where multicolor is actually kind of more interesting than monocolor, in my opinion, because it has a built-in restriction to it. Anyway, I'm sort of getting on a soapbox about color identity in general, but generally, I like to build monocolor decks, but I feel like the identity of a deck and the strengths of a deck goes beyond, the color identity that it is, so to speak. Like a cool deck's a cool deck.
I tend to agree that less colors, generally, I think restrictions are better. You find more interesting card choices. I always love to look at monocolored CEDH decks and see all the sorts of wacky things that go into them. They're trying to be competitive, but they're running all sorts of things that you almost never see. I personally almost always end up building 2 color decks. That's just my happy place I've landed on for whatever reason. But I think less colors is usually more interesting in terms of card choice
as Richard
stuff.
Garfield intended.
Yeah, I want to be contrary, but I definitely agree overall. For me, I think it's once you get past 3, I don't think there is any sort of universal rule that says you have to lose the plot. But a thing I'm really big on when people send me decks is describe to me the gimmick, not just I want to win the game, but what are the emotions you're trying to evoke, or what is the mechanic that you're trying to play around? And I can count on like one hand the number of decks that have been sent in that are 4 color or 5 color and have a gimmick that doesn't boil down to, holy heck, these cards are real good. Like once you see like Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, Phyrexian Arena, Garruk's Uprising, and I don't name any red enchantment, like everybody becomes Anakin Skywalker. They can't help themselves, and they just start putting in stuff that is so strong because they have the ability to, and they typically spread themselves too thin, trying to cover a multitude of colors across like 4 or 5 gimmicks, and I think, or multiple gimmicks that are available in 4 or 5 colors. And I think 1 through 3, you have the ability to pick one thing you really want to do, or 2 things you want to do pretty well, and hone in on them. And once you get out towards 4 or 5 colors, if you don't have like a really good outline or a really good North Star of what you want that deck to do and feel like, it's just so easy for it to devolve into, okay, well, I'm going to take this because it's going to help my fixing, and then I'm going to take this because it helps my card draw. And it's just so good. Like, you just get to take all of the most efficient options from everywhere. And one of my favorite parts about Commander is trying to find cards that are unplayable dog shit, like Mogus, and identify places where they become satisfactory. Like, I don't even like playing great cards. I like playing objectively terrible cards that become kind of okay in the context of whatever my deck is doing.
Yeah.
And I think once you get past 3 color, boy, does that get hard.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Just to sort of like wrap back around into like my point as well, because I'm a narcissist. If you took an Erebos deck, an Iara deck, Keurig, like any of these sort of like mono black options, and you gave me like 50 deck lists from like random players that play those commanders, and I pulled one that didn't have Gray Merchant of Asphodel in it, I would be, my head would explode. I would be so shocked. Like Cabal Coffers, like, like I feel like you could have a lot of homogeneity in a color combo in general that isn't just like a soup at a high end. I think the soup is the same at high colors for sure, but I feel like it can happen as well as lower colors. And I definitely think you are right that it happens more often with multiple color.
Yeah, it comes down to, are you able to differentiate your gimmick from, wow, this deck is good at Magic the Gathering, which isn't like a bad gimmick. There are plenty of tables where that is the appropriate gimmick to have, but a lot of the people that are playing this for a theatrical motivation want to have some type of unique gimmick, and I think it definitely struggles at 1 color, gets easier at 2 and 3, and then starts to get really hard again at 4 and 5 because you have so many options for, man, that card's shiny.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, I feel horrible for Khan. He's probably like falling asleep in his chair. Huh? What?
Who? I would say, I think one of the fun parts of Commander is you don't have the ability to run 4 of something. So when you want an effect, you have to play the 2nd and 3rd and 4th best option if you want some level of consistency with that effect. So because of that, I think less colors is usually better, because once you're in 5 colors, you actually do have more of those good versions of the effects, and you don't have to play some of the more jank alternatives. And it's just what I love. I love playing Izzet because I can't deal with enchantments easily, so I like having my quirky Spine of Ishsaw to blow up enchantments, And I think that that's part of the fun of deck building, is trying to get over these hurdles. And then having less colors gives you more hurdles to get over.
Yeah, I do. I agree with that very much.
Now, we don't actually have a proper outro for the podcast. We usually just kind of abruptly end it.
Yeah, we just kind of like